So I was just hoping to tell y'all a story that just oh, it just kind of illustrates like how life just does what it does, despite our best efforts. It just kind of does what it does, and it's a journey. And I learned quite a bit from this episode, and I think some of the things I'm going to talk about might be helpful for people on a couple levels, or it might be total garbage. But either way, hey, by the way, I'm supposed to say this: subscribe, turn on the notifications, that little bell, like, hate, leave a comment. It helps the algorithm. Okay, that said, I have this 2012 Camry hybrid, white. I got it when we moved to Las Vegas because I wanted a car that would reflect the desert heat, and I wanted something practical that wouldn't need a lot of maintenance. And it has been an absolute treasure. Like, I used to really be into like cars. I was like, oh yeah, I want this car and this fancy thing and that fancy thing in the early days of my being an attending physician. And then I bought this thing and I was like, wow, it just gets me from A to B. It's reliable. It's reasonably quiet. It's reasonably safe. It's big enough. Perfect. So it's always served me really well. And when we moved back to the Bay Area, it moved with us. And it's really kind of my main car for, the last, 12 years. So, but recently we got a second car to replace my wife's old car. And so now, because that car is new, we all like to drive that car. So my poor Cam sits in the driveway. And of course, we don't park in our garage because we live in the Bay Area. So the garage is full of storage and garbage and kid stuff because the houses are teeny tiny for way too much money here. So it's parked in the garage. And the other day, I was going to take it because my wife was taking the other car, and I had to take my youngest to her camp because it's the summer. So we get in and I start the car and I turn on the AC because unusually hot all of a sudden. And we haven't had to use really AC for most of the summer. It's been freezing cold in the Bay Area where I am. I'm up in a part where it's a microclimate where this fog rolls in, and it can be like 90 degrees in Palo Alto or in the Silicon Valley or in San Jose. And where I am, it'll be 63 and windy as fudge. So we're usually in parkas and everyone else is in shorts. But this time it was warm. So I turned on the AC and I was like, the heck, man? It smells like there's a coolant leak or something, like something isn't right. And I had just taken the car like 4 days ago to the mechanic to get oil change and tire rotation, which is really all you need on a Toyota Camry. Like, that's pretty much it. As long as you do that, the thing's going to last forever, more or less. I mean, there's some subtlety there. But anyways, and the car's in great shape, right? It's got about 100,000 miles on it. So I smell this coolant smell. Like, it doesn't smell right. I'm like, And my daughter's like, it smells yucky. And I'm like, yeah, we just haven't used the AC. Maybe, or maybe when they did the service, they mucked something up or caused a leak or something, but it just isn't right. And so we kind of cranked up the AC more, and it just didn't really smell so good. So then I just opened windows and I was like, well, maybe I got to like ask the guy or something, figure out what's going on. And then it occurred to me, I'm like, but wait, maybe something got up in the car, like, and, died or something, because it really doesn't smell right. But the smell kind of cleared. So I was like, okay, no problem. Let me drop her off. And then I decided I'll go to the gym because I had some time. So I was like, okay, I drove to the Stanford gym. I park in their underground parking lot. And I'm like, something's nagging at me. Let me just pop the hood and make sure there isn't like a leak or something in there. Maybe a bird built a nest in there or something, right? So I open the hood and there's the engine compartment. And on top of the black protective plastic where, it covers the engine, right in front of that, there's this kind of heat shield thing, this manifold thing. And it's made of like aluminum. On top of it was all this insulation that was curled up into a little ball. And it's so funny where my mind went. So the mind is just doing what it does. Like, thoughts are just going across the sky, and I'm watching all this happen. And my mind goes, oh, that stinking mechanic. He accidentally pulled out some insulation and forgot to put it back, doing like an oil change, which shouldn't happen, right? So I'm all mad. I'm like, well, I'm not going to him again. Like, feel all this like stuff coming up in the body. And then I'm like, wait a minute, there's an alternate explanation. And I look carefully. I turn on my flashlight on my phone, and there's rat droppings in the center of this thing. Basically, it's a rat's nest. So at this point, I'm like, wait a second. And then I'm like, oh my God, a rat got into the car while it was in the driveway, like sitting there, not being used much. We'd recently gone on a road trip with the other car. So the thing was sitting in the driveway for like a week and probably went in there and built this nest. But the nest wasn't there 3-4 days ago when the mechanic did his thing, because I popped the hood at that time and I looked, because I always want to double check that the fluids are okay, that the oil has been changed and everything. I'm just anal that way because I got burned once years ago, and fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, I kill you. So I checked then and there was nothing, but now there's this nest and I'm like, oh my God, this is new. Like this rat somehow has decided to build a nest out of my insulation in my car. And I was just like, what? And then I was like, what was I smelling? And I thought, well, I bet. And I look around the engine compartment and there's no other nest stuff. I'm looking at wires because I've heard that they chew on wires and I didn't see any damaged wires. I'm poking around with my flashlight in the Stanford Gym parking lot, right? I don't see anything. And I'm like, well, there's some rat droppings scattered around. I bet this rat peed all over the place. It may have even peed in my HVAC ducts, in my AC ducts, because I could see the intake and I put my nose up to it and I took a big whiff and I was like, oh shit, that's rat urine. And of course, the doctor in me, right, who's seen this stuff is like, okay, now I'm going to get hantavirus or some terrible rat-borne airborne illness, right? That comes from like when the feces dries and it's aerosolized, or the urine, and you inhale it, right? You get this like, and I had a colleague actually who died, was hiking in Yosemite, stayed in one of the cabins or something, and ended up having this undefined lung disease, and they ended up diagnosing hantavirus, which is this, it's pretty rare. Often in the South, I think it's in the Southwest is where it's localized, and had, acute respiratory distress syndrome, ECMO, everything, and passed away. This was years ago. So, I have this recall bias. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to die of hantavirus. But then the part of me that's on this awakening journey was like, that'll be an interesting ride. Like proned on a ventilator, that'll be a new experience. Like it was crazy. But I knew that the statistics and the likelihood was poor. It was also very unlikely I was going to get bubonic plague or something. And then I thought about my daughter, how we had cranked the AC and was running all this. And I was like, oh my God. So I made a couple decisions. I was like, okay, I'm going to Google this stuff when I get home, but I got to get my daughter from camp. So I'm going to go to the gym, come back to the studio, do some work, get my daughter. I got her. And I'm like, okay, listen, let me press recirc on the AC, because even though it's hot, I don't want air coming in through this, through this intake, through the rat urine and everything, and coming into the cabin. And when I pressed recirc, the smell pretty much went away. So I was like, okay, now this becomes relevant. So I pick up my daughter. We don't smell much because I've got the windows open too, and I've got the recirc on. And I told her the story. I showed her the picture of the rat's nest and all this. And she was like, oh my gosh. And I was like, it must have like come in, made a nest, bailed. We'll have to figure out how we're going to keep it out of the car. So we go to the grocery store. But prior to that, when I was in the studio, I Googled like, okay, what's the deal with rats and cars? And I learned a few things, right? I learned that they're attracted to the wires because often they have soy-based, plant-based insulation, and the rats really like those wires, so they'll often chew on them. They're attracted to it because it's safe, dark, and warm, the engines. They're attracted to cars that often aren't driven as much, so there isn't all the disruption. They often have multiple nests in different areas, so that maybe just like their vacation home is your Camry's engine. There are certain places they like to go. The main engine compartment where mine set up its nest, but then also it said they like to set up shop right above your cabin air filter. And so I thought, well, where is that? I don't know where the cabin air filter is. And so I Googled 2012 Camry cabin air filter, and a video comes up on YouTube that says, oh, this thing exists in your glove compartment. You can open your glove compartment and it's right behind there. And I had no idea. I was like, I was today years old when I learned that I could change my own cabin air filter quite easily, when the mechanics are always charging you as part of the service and all that. And I was like, oh, great. So I ordered a couple new filters on Amazon, and I was like, okay, I'll do this tomorrow when the Amazon filters come, Amazon Prime 1-day delivery. Great. So I go pick up my daughter. We go to the grocery store and I'm like, did you know, Maya, that there's a cabin air filter right behind the glove box? And I wonder if the rat was living there and that's why it stank so much. And she's like, oh, well, let's look. And I'm like, okay. So we take all the stuff out of the glove compartment. She's sitting in the passenger side, right? I go back there. There's a little latch. You pop it open and then you can see the cartridge, the little air filter like you have at home in your air ducts, those little filters that are one way and the airflow goes a certain way. So I go, okay, let me just pull it out. I pull it out and I go, let's take a look. And we look inside it. First of all, it's stained throughout and it looks disgusting. There's a smell coming off it that smells just horrendous. Like if you've ever owned a hamster, which we have multiple hamsters, this is what a dirty cage smells like. And we look at it and in the folds of the filter are rat droppings, like dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And it's covered with dried urine. And we both look at it and we're like, oh my God. But we're kind of laughing going, hey, we solved the mystery. This is where it was stinking, right? So I'm like, cool, let's throw it out. But let's just give me the flashlight. Let's just peek in the empty duct now and see that there's no more droppings in there. So we look in, drum roll, what do we see? Hanging from the top of the duct is this ball of fur. And all we can see is a ball of fur. We're like, what? And it was my daughter who like figured it out instantly. She was like, there's a rat in there. And we're both like, what? And to her credit, I have to say, she was like, let's look at it. Like didn't flinch, like made a lot of noises, but really didn't flinch. Was just like, okay, let's look. And I took a couple pictures. She took a couple pictures of it. And I'm like, that rat is not alive. Like, cause it's not moving. Like if a rat saw us like that, it's going to be out of there. And so we were like, holy shit, there's a dead rat in our glove compartment air duct. I've taken this thing out that's horrendous, that probably is going to give us bubonic plague just by looking at it, like airborne bubonic plague. I throw it in the trash near the grocery store and we close up the glove compartment. We both have this like 10,000 mile stare on our face. Like we still have to get groceries and go home in this car that is now officially haunted by a dead rat that's right there that we're going to have to breathe the air of. So I'm like, okay, it's still on recirc. We're going to open all the windows. We're going to close up the glove compartment. We're going to jam this couple microfiber rags I have in there. And we're going to drive home. And after getting groceries, which we put in the trunk, we drove home. And so I go in and I tell my wife, Margaret, I'm like, you're never going to believe this story. And so I tell her the whole story and she's like, holy crap. So of course, all of us are like, with these like dishwashing gloves, because we didn't even trust the nitrile gloves, KN95 masks that we'd had from the pandemic that nobody wore in like 3 years. So we put those on and we go in to the glove compartment. She's holding the flashlight. I'm looking and I reach in and I try to grab this ball of fur and it partially pulls out. And I kind of turn it and it just this rat face looking at me. And I can tell, I'm like, it's not coming out. It was caught in the actual ductwork of the vehicle in some kind of like, almost like a rat trap. And that's what killed it. And then I realized what happened. When I had turned on the recirculation button, that closes a valve in the duct that keeps outside air from entering the cabin and just recirculates the air in the cabin instead. When I pushed that button, that's what sealed the fate of this rat. It got caught. It was probably hiding as we were driving that morning. It was hiding above the air filter, which was probably like its secondary nest, judging by the amount of excrement in this filter. And when I pushed the button, it probably heard something and tried to move, and it got caught in this trap. And that's why I couldn't remove it. So I pushed the recirculate button and it went, I heard the thing move and the rat itself moved. And then I tried to pull it and it wouldn't come out. And then my wife and I are like, oh my God. And you could feel it was still kind of warm. Now, some of that may have been the ambient temperature, but it was there was no rigor mortis. The rat wasn't stiff. This was a freshly dead rat. It didn't stink apart from the urine. And we were like, holy crap. So I was like, we were starting to get desperate because she is trying to get it out. I could fur, like rat fur was flying everywhere. I was like, oh my God, we're going to rip this thing in half. And then we're going to have rat guts in our vent. And then we're going to have to like tell CarMax there was nothing wrong and just sell the car. We're already scheming, like, how do we get rid of this like rat infested? So at this point, I was like, okay, let's try this. Keep your hands safe. Keep wiggling the rat. Okay, nothing's happening. Okay, let me grab the rat and I'm going to keep pushing this vent, unvent, and keep loosening it every time the vent opens and closes. And finally, it just goes thunk. And there it was. And I looked at it. It was this beautiful rat, actually beautiful, really good looking rat. Male, I could tell because, not because it told me its pronouns, but because it had big freaking nuts. And beautiful long tail, beautiful fur. Its face was like what you see in Charlotte's Web, like that rat in Charlotte's Web. I forget his name, whether it was Ralph or something, but it was like that. And it was super freshly dead. And we all three looked at it. My other daughter's up at camp right now, and the 16-year-old, and so she couldn't see this, and she doesn't know about it because this is supposed to be her car when she gets her license. Shh. Hopefully she's not watching this. And we just looked at it and marveled at like how this thing was just living its life. Like there it was in the morning, like living its life in the nest. And out of the blue, its whole house starts shaking and rattling and driving off. Things get really hot and unpleasant. And then zoop, it's caught in a vent. And there it was. And I thought, this thing's whole path is as valid as anything. It's the same awareness living as a rat as what's looking out through my eyes and my wife's eyes and my daughter's eyes. And the whole thing, rather than being this kind of woe is us, oh my God, what are we, I can't believe a rat went in here. It should have been otherwise. It could have been otherwise. All of us were just like, wow, like, isn't that amazing? Like how life will find a way to live wherever it is. And when it dies, it just does so kind of perfectly. And we got it out, and like, it makes a story for us. We feel bad in a way. We're like, oh, this thing, it was just living its life. But at the same time, it's like, well, it can't live its life in our car. It can't really give us diseases and so on and so forth. And so there was all of that. But there was the beauty and the perfection of it, and the knowing that a kind of gratitude arises, not just for everything being as it was, but for how much worse it could have been. So imagine I didn't Google it and I just let it be, and maybe I thought I'll take it to the mechanic in the next week or whatever. That rat would have decomposed in the car, would have been full of maggots, it would have stunk, flies would have come out of our vents, and it would have taken forever to get the stink out of the car. Instead, we got lucky. We figured it out, and we were able to extricate the rat. The next thing is that I learned a bunch of stuff, right? Which I'll try to convey some of this now. By the way, I have no idea why I'm doing this video. I just felt like doing it today. I felt like doing it as a pre-record because I wanted to share the story. There's no reason other than that it happened. Isn't that the best reason? So I learned that if you open your hood and you're concerned about this in any way, like you have, so that the signs of rat infestation can be an odd smell in the car. It can be findings of rat droppings. It can be seeing the chewed wires, malfunctions in the car. So the way, and by the way, the other thing that rats are attracted to is when you leave food in the car, crumbs and filthy stuff that kids do. So there's some crumbs in the car, but generally it's quite clean. In fact, I just had it professionally cleaned. So those can attract rats. So you pop the hood, you look around, you look at wires, you look for droppings, you smell around, and you see, okay. So once you find evidence of a rat, you can take it to the mechanic to see if there's any mechanical issues. If not, you can actually clean your engine using a soapy solution. And there's great YouTube videos on how to do this. So your mileage may vary. Check on in your own car model to make sure it's safe to do this. But, with soap and water, mild disinfectants, you can use different bleach solutions. This is online. Don't listen to me, okay? Don't ruin your car because of me. And then you can spray it down. And I did that. Wash out all the droppings and the urine, clean out the nest, and you want gloves and a N95 type mask because these things can spread disease. And again, a mechanic if there's any signs of damage. And then cleaning out the inside of your car to make sure there's no foodstuffs and things like that. You always want to check your trunk because they can get in the trunk. Rats can get in your car a million different ways. They climb up the wheel wells. If you have rust spots on your car, they'll go in through these tiny little spots, but they can get in there. If you leave your car idle for a long time, even if it's in a garage, if there are rats, they can get in there. So that's one thing to think about. It's a risk factor for it. So once you clean everything, and what I did was I actually disinfected the whole thing. I used Clorox wipes in the duct in where the air filter goes. I'm waiting for the new air filters to come today. I sprayed Lysol everywhere just to disinfect the surfaces. And then what you can do is one of the folk tales online that people seem to say it's reasonably effective is you can get these peppermint oil solutions, either the oil itself and mix it in water, or there are solutions you can buy on Amazon, and you spray it all around the engine compartment. And there's certain areas of the engine you avoid that get quite hot because they can burn the oil and cause smoke. There's like a heat plate and things like that, heat shield. So you can spray it around, and typically rodents, mice, squirrels, and rats don't like the smell of peppermint oil. So that can maybe be a deterrent. So the things I learned is, okay, if I'm going to leave my car sitting like that, I'm going to do these things. I'm going to check every so often under the hood. I'm going to look for signs of rat infestation. I've ordered the peppermint oil. I'm going to do that, keep my engine kind of clean, keep the car clean, and just have a healthy respect that nature will find a way to get in your shit. And it's okay. And you can stay vigilant. And, these things can carry disease. So you do want to make sure to keep your family safe and yourself safe by doing these simple things. So that's really the story. What's the moral? Who knows? It's all of the above, right? But in the end, what I found is on kind of self-reflection, as I've been pointing at more and more in my shows, like, there really isn't a problem. It's just, okay, here's the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And in a way, when you see kind of these things as an adventure and a story and another experience, even hantavirus, which nobody wants, life takes on a very different flavor. It's like a voluntary flavor instead of oh, woe is me, I'm trapped in samsara, in the veil of tears, living out suffering. Well, sure. Or the next thing is happening just this. All right. And it makes me think of Rat, Round and Round, one of the great songs of the 80s, which I highly recommend you listen to after watching this video. All right, smash that like button. Leave a comment and tell me, have you had rats in your engine? What have you found to be effective? And tell us your best rodent infestation in an automobile story in the comments below, and I will read them and like them and reply if they are awesome. All right, guys, I love you. Round and round. Love will find a way, just give it time. And we out.